Nothing better than a full house. So thank you all for joining us for the establishment of the Pamela B. Harris Professorship and our inaugural appointment of its first chairholder, Dr. Peter Hovmand. And I'm delighted that we're able to get together in person after perhaps a 1.5 year delay in our efforts to do this. So first of all, congratulations, Peter, and congratulations, Pam. And I'm delighted that we have both a number of family members, friends, colleagues, appreciative individuals, donors who are with us this evening for really a grand event. Now, Dr. Hovmand, I don't get to go into a lot of detail about him, but I will comment that, as you will see, if those of you who don't know him well, that he has become a transformational member of our Center for Community Health Integration led by Kurt Stange, and has a unique expertise in understanding community needs and health using a very engineering systems analytical approach. So he understands things that most of us have worried about and been concerned about, but just haven't understood. And he really does understand that. And Dr. Stange will introduce him in a few minutes later this afternoon. So I welcome all of you for that. And before I get to introduce Dr. Stange, who will then introduce Dr. Hovmand, it's my honor to comment and then introduce Dr. Pamela Davis, my immediate predecessor as the Dean of the School of Medicine. Thank you. Airplane mode works, so. Dr. Davis is the Arlene and Curtis Garvin Research Professor and prior Dean of the School of Medicine, and I think everybody in the room knows that. As an investigator, educator, and mentor and leader, she has had a paradigm-shifting effect on our School of Medicine and on the university, although I must admit that during many conversations with Pam as the Vice Dean for Oncology, sometimes the university came along kicking and screaming in her expertise and guidance, which I think was all been beneficial for the university and certainly for the school. Dr. Davis received her MD and her PhD from Duke University, was a fellow at the National Institutes of Health, became interested there in pulmonary medicine with a focus on cystic fibrosis, and then joined the faculty here and the Center for Cystic Fibrosis in 1981 in the Department of Pediatrics and Medicine. As a researcher, I will remind you that Dr. Davis is a leading figure in the development of both the understanding and the management, and then developing novel therapies for cystic fibrosis. Her unit here is one of the most nationally recognized for all efforts in clinical trial investigation in cystic fibrosis. And she was instrumental with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation in developing the first corrective therapy for this disease, and that's reflected in her more than 150 publications, many of which are highly sought after. Additionally, Dr. Davis holds 7 patents as a founding scientist at Copernicus Therapeutics, a biotechnology company that we've kept local, which is not so easy. If you allow me, I'll fast forward to 2007 when she was appointed Dean of the School of Medicine, a role that she held for 13 years after serving as Vice Dean for Research and as interim dean, and then stepped down in 2020. When her tenure ended as dean, the school was ranked 11th nationally in producing academic researchers, 24th in NIH funding, and was a consistent top 25 medical school in U.S. News and World Report rankings. She recruited most of our current department chairs, a number of whom are here this evening with us, and many dozens and dozens of faculty, and has worked incredibly hard during her tenure to retain our best faculty, including pursuing many endowed chairs, such as the one that we will recognize this evening. She moved the school's finances from very negative to very positive, paving the way for us to make long-term and high-impact investments, which we continue to benefit from today. She secured well over $500 million in increased funds in the Forward Thinking campaign to benefit the School of Medicine. And if I turn to her interest in education beyond her own ability to recruit and engage trainees at all levels, she also championed the innovation that led to the Western Reserve II curriculum, which emphasized scholarship, civic professionalism, tools for lifelong learning, which is really the backbone of our medical education program, which is small group learning, self-learning, and the study of complex cases. And this places Dr. Davis, and we're just at the point that perhaps this will become recognized, on the same pedestal as Dean Joe Warren, who in the 50s established the WR1 curriculum, really to national acclaim. She's also added pathway programs to the curriculum with new studies of interest in world medicine, global health, humanities and medicine, innovation and entrepreneurship, wellness and prevention, and urban health. In 2019, after a few years of us waiting for the construction, she stewarded the School of Medicine's medical education programs into the new Sampson Pavilion of the Health Education Campus, which I'm sure all of you local have been through and seen, and helped to coordinate the education programs between the CCLCM and its college program and the university program, and championed our efforts in interprofessional education, something we're still sorting through and learning about. So that effort also involved us abandoning, during a very active process, the cadaver approach to anatomy, and now we actually use a hollow anatomy effort led by Mark Griswold. It was a risk to do that, and Pam took it on with aplomb, and it's incredibly effective now. Again, something which is being nationally taken up across the country. So for her efforts in all of these areas, she was inducted into the National Academy of Medicine in 2014. In 2018, she received the Case Medal for Excellence in Health Sciences Innovation. In 2019, she was elected to the National Academy of Mentors, and our medical alumni selected her to receive the Honorary Alumni Award. And she has been inducted at the faculty level as a distinguished university professor. I'm not quite done. A few more things I want to comment on. She has advanced for the school and for its education programs, excellence in health science and professional education, efforts to translate our science to the bedside into patient care and to advancing both individual and community health, and really undertook an effort to bring community health into our research and community activities. When COVID began, she installed Heidi Gullett as the medical director for the Cuyahoga Board of Health, and that really helped them in their COVID preparedness and response. She supported and appointed Kurt Stanke as the director of the new Center for Community Health Integration, and that led to the joint recruitment with the Schools of Engineering and MSAS of Peter Hovmand, our recipient tonight. And she encouraged Rong Zhu to pursue her efforts and interests in computational health analytics as the director of a brand new Center for Artificial Intelligence and Drug Discovery, and recently has collaborated with Dr. Zhu on a number of publications on COVID in JAMA, using her ability to understand and interrogate huge medical databases. And she's really at the cutting edge of all of that activity. And she has supported a statewide interest through the CTSC, led by Mike Constant, who's with us here this evening, in efforts around hypertension, diabetes, infant mortality, which has led to major health benefits and certainly to improved infant survival. In addition, her deanship saw a marked expansion of the collaborative environment citywide for research efforts, both in community, in basic science, and translational sciences, through the CTSC, through the Comprehensive Cancer Center, the brand new Alzheimer's Center. And so she really is the pinnacle of medical effort and medical research in this city. And I'm delighted that we are able to see so many donors here this evening to establish a professorship bearing her name. And I think it's a testament of Pam's leadership through decades here in the city. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Pam Davis. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan, for that very kind introduction. This is really a tremendous honor for me. I've explained many times to donors trying to create a legacy for a loved one that, as much as supporting the work of the chairholder, a named endowed chair also means that every time the chairholder signs a letter or an email or puts up a slide at a national meeting, that designation will be seen. And now, that's all happening for me. Thank you so much to all of you who worked and donated to make this designation possible. I'd also like to thank the team who assembled this celebration today, Rebecca, Kathy, and Maureen. I'm incredibly grateful to all of you. It should go without saying that any success that I have had only occurred with a great deal of help from a great many people, individuals, groups, and institutions. I'd like to thank everybody personally today, but I couldn't possibly fit that into the allotted time. I know how important you are, all of you. But I would like today to send a love letter to those who were instrumental in my own success and in the success of the institutionals I represented and led for so many years. Many of you are here today. You all deserve the credit. Now, some of this love letter is also on behalf of patients with CF, whose lives you made better. And some of the love letter is on behalf of the students who go through our medical school to become doctors or PhDs or physician assistants or master's degree holders and develop satisfying, productive, and important careers. And some of it's on behalf of the patients whose lives you've improved by the extraordinary research that you've done. And some of it's just for me. In case I forget to say it enough through the next few minutes, thank you. This is a love letter to all who have worked to put CF into the annals of medical history. What was a rapidly fatal disease is now being controlled. We're not quite there yet, but we're close. We now have drugs that attack the basic defect quite effectively. Now, in 2015, bibliographic analysis was applied to determine what prior work was most influential in the development of novel drugs. And one of their very first case studies was ivacaftor, the first drug directed at the basic defect in CF. This analysis placed CWRU as an institution as the most important contributor, and 8 of our scientists and physicians were among the top 20, and they all did their work that got on that list at Case Western Reserve. As we thank the current program leaders, Mitch Drum, let's see if I can do, Mitch Drum and Mike Constant, and we venerate the giants upon whose shoulders we stood to do this work. We should also not forget the myriad students, technicians, nurses, health professionals who contributed to who are represented in this photo by only a few of them, who made all this possible. And of course, all of this takes money. We were so fortunate to have incredible philanthropic support from the dedicated and passionate donors led by Jim and Connie Brown, whom you see here. These funds allowed us to recruit new talent and get the preliminary data to compete for funds from the NIH and the CF Foundation, which powered the forward motion of our mission. Thank you. This is a love letter for all of those who worked with me over the nearly 14 years I was in the dean's office, and to President Snyder for appointing me to this position. We set lofty goals for the School of Medicine, to continue our excellence in research, but to go beyond that, to assure that what we discover can be brought to benefit patients, to provide the very best medical education, and to improve the health of the community. These are a tall order, but we had much success in approaching them. Now, all these goals required money to invest in them, and our financial officers kept us on track. Our fabulous donors gained steam as we went, and catalyzed by our development officers, exceeded all goals and expectations to provide the wherewithal for us to fulfill our dreams. All of this activity allowed us to make large investments, hundreds of millions of dollars, from my very first chair appointment in 2008 to investments in education and extensive investments in basic science and translational research. These investments not only resulted in grants and papers and educational innovation and important discoveries for our patients, but they kept the School of Medicine in a leadership position among research-intensive medical schools. Thank you to all who contributed to this success. Our medical school punches above its financial weight class in research and in bringing technologies to patients, even in competitions with schools who have much more money to spend. Our educational programs expanded, adding a physician assistant program, developing and expanding master's programs, and continuing our excellence in our health professions offerings, as well as basic science training. We are particularly proud of the continuing innovation in the medical school curricula in the university program and the Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine, including the augmented reality anatomy course, public health education, great success in recruiting students from groups underrepresented in medicine, and our important thesis requirement, one of only 3 in the country, at least the last time I looked. Our students pursuing all these different interests are our future. Thank you to all of you who devoted time and energy to educating the next generation and to inspiring and to guiding them. You can take great pride in your accomplishment. Now, it's important to recognize the leaders of our affiliated hospitals who saw to it that our students got great training experiences and worked to develop research programs that would break through barriers and bring new hope to patients. Murray Altos and Susan Fuhrer at the VA oversaw some of our most popular student rotations, and Bernie Boulanger at Metro would always accommodate another student if we needed it. And he also always paid attention to the community. Thank you. Fred Rothstein, with whom I worked the longest, and his successor, Dan Simon, kept university hospitals prominent in our academic community. I'm especially grateful to Jim Young, former executive dean of the CCLCM, and then chief academic officer at the Cleveland Clinic. Years and years ago, we collaborated on a joint medical school building that morphed into the spectacular interprofessional health education campus that our students enjoy today. This building wraps a beautiful skin around our compelling educational programs. Jim also joined me in promoting research collaboration, manifest in the alliance of our biomedical engineering departments and the consolidation of our NIH research grants in the Blue Ridge rankings. Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. And his successor, Bud Isaacson, is proving eminently worthy of that mantle. I send this love letter, too, to those who work to develop our community programs. With the COVID pandemic, community health has assumed a prominent position in many medical schools, but we began our work decades ago, developing partnerships with community organizations and the hospitals, and going after the grants to support it. We made great efforts to improve primary care of common diseases, infant mortality, to reduce deaths from opioids, to combat the scourge of racism and socioeconomic deprivation, and to build a pipeline of talented students from the inner city of Cleveland to our medical school. Thank you to all who have participated in this work to make life better in Cleveland. You have had great success. Infant mortality is down. We now save about 50 more babies a year than when we started. Hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and heart failure are better cared for and show better results in all racial and socioeconomic groups. And that work has expanded to all Ohio through Mike Constan's good offices. One of our faculty, Heidi Gullett, became incident commander for Cuyahoga County for the initial phases of the COVID-19 pandemic. The pipeline from John Hay High School of Science and Medicine has reached the School of Medicine with the good offices of Bob Haney, and the first students are graduated and off to their residencies. We all know we have a long way to go, but as a Chinese proverb teaches, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. It's impossible to acknowledge all the individuals who have contributed to the medical school's manifest success over my time as dean, but I've pictured the core team that made it work. Our 2 lead finance officers and their teams gave us the wherewithal to operate. Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Chris. Our development team sustained the vital links to our fantastic donor community. Thank you, Carol and Mike and Lindsay. Our vice deans for research and translational research developed their programs in many directions. Basic science developments led to important commercialization successes. Thank you, Mark. And building our translational research expertise allowed us to enter the community and public health space and make life better for many people. Thank you, Mike. We needed to develop our faculty, attend to diversity, and we needed leadership in this realm. Thank you, Sana, who inaugurated that vice dean role. Our education mission only thrives with brilliant, dedicated, and steady expertise provided by strong leaders. Thank you, Pat, for reminding us to keep calm and carry on. It was also important to acknowledge and thank the administrative leaders who've kept us on track and made us look good. We needed our facilities to be tip-top. Thank you, Jill. And Flex was very important for our women faculty. Thank you, Lisa, and for so much more. We needed translational research, the translational research enterprise to run smoothly. Thank you, Ginny, for all that and for your manifold skills working with me over 35 years. And I could not have managed without my office being steady, excellent, cheerful, and careful. Dina Griesel and Susan Riker took care of all that. They are rocks. Thank you all. You made this a better place to work, to study, to investigate, to educate. You made us succeed. But none of us lives only in the workaday world. I have been blessed by supportive family, and I take great joy in them. My parents believed fervently in the importance of a good education and passed on to me their bedrock values: respect for all, integrity, the obligation to do well for others, and grit. I'd be nowhere without Florence and Elmer Bowes. My sons Jason and Galen were enthusiastic supporters of my career and even participated in some of our clinical research and grew up to be fine men and dedicated dads. They're now raising families of their own. They instill in their children the sense of limitless possibility, but also my parents' sense that with great natural gifts come great responsibility. Their marriages and the births of their children during the last 14 years have been incredibly positive changes in my life. Now, one of the best things about being dean was that I was invited to the president's house, where I met the love of my life and my soulmate, Jim Herget. We married, and now, in addition to 2 fine sons, I have 2 wonderful daughters, Lauren and Elizabeth. They also married recently. Well-educated and successful in their careers, they bring much joy into our lives. Jim has been a rock and a strength for me. None of my professional accomplishments would have meant as much without my family's love and support. Thank you. This love letter is especially for you. So now I'm no longer the lead in CF research, nor the dean. What now? Well, I have been blessed with extraordinary opportunity and the liberty to move into new areas and utilize new approaches and technologies to answer pressing questions. Thank you, Stan, for that liberation. I am extremely grateful to Professor Rong Zhu, a brilliant and creative thinker who has guided me through the informatics and mathematics of our projects on the reciprocal impact of COVID on major chronic illnesses. It's been great fun and very productive, and I am learning a great deal. I also look forward to working with the education group on using augmented reality avatars for clinical training, and with the holder of this new chair, Peter Hovmand, to use systems analysis to identify and mitigate the barriers to advancement of women both in academic medicine, both here and across the country. I'm very grateful, too, to find an academic home in the Center for Community Health Integration, led by Kurt Stange and Heidi Gullett, who have welcomed me and my peculiarities with open arms. So we're going places, all of us. Even now, we've not tested the limits of what we can do. So in summary, thank you, thank you, thank you for all you have done for CF, for the school, and for me. Let's roll on with undiminished enthusiasm. Thank you.
So Pam, don't go too far. As Pam was up here, as she's been up here for 40 or 50 endowment celebrations, she might have noticed that all we have is water and there's no crystal bowl, which I can't seem to find. So I'm really sorry, but we don't have a bowl for you to take home. But we do have something that the rest of the school, including you, will benefit from as looking down from a shoulder-high space on the wall. As is our custom, we have a portrait which is to be unveiled right now of Pam, and will go up in the School of Medicine. I can do the shot without cracking.
Want some help?
We have a place picked out in the BRB lobby, and it'll be prominently seen and incredibly well received.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. And probably while Peter's talking, you know, the cover back on. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stan. I appreciate it.
It is now my opportunity to shift gears slightly and ask Dr. Stange to come to the stage and introduce our chairholder, Peter Hovmand. Dr. Stange is the Dorothy Jones Weatherhead Professor here at the School of Medicine, serves as the director, as you've heard, of the Center for Community Health Integration, something he created and has run with incredibly. He holds appointments in the Department of Medicine, in the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health, the Department of Population and Quantitative Health Sciences, in addition to being a member of the Case Comprehensive Cancer Center and its Population and Cancer Prevention program. As a family and public health physician, Dr. Stange practices at a neighborhood family practice, a federally qualified community health center here in Cleveland, where he really does participate directly with community issues on a day-to-day basis. And for more than 2 decades, he's been learning and applying a complexity of scientific principles to trying to understand what is it that impacts the health of our community and the social determinants of health. And as he has studied this, he has become more insightful, using more complex mechanisms and approaches, including mixed quantitative and qualitative research, systems approaches, understanding participatory methods and understanding patient needs, community health needs, and developing computer simulation models in primary care that will help us understand and predict issues related to patient and population outcomes. He serves as the editor for the Annals of Family Medicine, is an American Cancer Society clinical research professor, now longstanding. He is active in practice-based multi-method participatory research and development that is aimed at improving community and population health. Recently, he has focused on poverty and the devastating impact that social determinants of health have on the ability to provide care and to provide longevity in a healthy environment. And he is a member of the National Academy of Medicine and a distinguished university professor. So Dr. Stange, I would like you to come to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gerson. As you heard from Dr. Gerson and from Dr. Davis herself, the infrastructure in which we work now, the relationships, the vision, was in large part developed by Dr. Davis, and we're grateful for that. As dean, she emphasized what can be accomplished if we work together on three priorities: generating new knowledge, educating the next generation, and focusing attention on the health of our community. And imagining the joy that Dr. Gullett and Jim Bindis and I had when she finished her deanship and she was looking for a place to perch, and she decided to come with us in this little center that she actually had established. Imagine what it's like to have her wisdom and experience as a colleague working day to day. It's really wonderful. And now, without the pressures of being dean, she's actually developing new inroads into all those three priority areas that she developed. In a world that gravitates towards simple answers to complex problems, Dr. Davis is working to develop understanding and action on the complex systems that underlie some of our most challenging and important problems. The inaugural holder of the Pamela B. Davis Chair brings a novel approach and innovative methods to taking on some of these challenging and important problems. Problems like gender inequality, structural racism, the current epidemics of obesity and interpersonal violence, cancer disparities, environmental degradation. Most people run away from complex problems like this or satisfy themselves by looking at one small portion of it. To understand and work on these kind of complex problems, you need a way to bring together both numbers and narrative. But how do you do that? Well, it helps if you have a math, science, engineering kind of brain. Peter's father, whom I just met, is a chemical engineer, and Peter's undergraduate degree is in electrical engineering and applied mathematics. And that helps him to see these things in their largest and sometimes most abstract forms. It also helps if you have a way of understanding complex systems on the ground in the lived experience of people. Peter's mother, whom I also just had the pleasure of meeting, is a social worker, and she gave him that experience at an early stage. And his master's degree is in social work. And Peter and Charlene's son, Ivan, who I've only met a few times, I have a really strong sense is just living this transdisciplinary way of living. I don't think he thinks he's having to put together these parts. I just think that's how he thinks the world is and how he can interact with the world. But Peter found a way to put together these statistics and these stories and did an interdisciplinary PhD. And then working on different complex problems in his own backyard in St. Louis and in different countries around the world, he developed a method called community-based system dynamics. And each word in that title has meaning. So community-based, that means being grounded in the wisdom of those living with the complex problems and the environmental problems that we're trying to solve. Systems, looking at not just at the parts, but how they fit together. Dynamics, understanding how change happens over time and what the multi-level leverage points are that might be possible for changing systems that otherwise seem intractable. Peter already is working with Pam in these three areas of emphasis: research, education, and community health. He's working with Pam and colleagues in the Center for Community Health Integration and across the university and the medical school and our community, and frankly around the world, to develop the capacity for us to work together on tackling some of the most important and toughest problems in health and society. I look forward to what Peter Hovmand has to say to us today as the inaugural holder of the Pamela B. Davis, MD, PhD chair.
Thank you, Kurt and Dean Gerson and Pam. This is truly an honor and deeply grateful for the opportunity to share some of the work I've been doing over the years, and really happy to have friends and family be able to attend and join us in person. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the focus of my work, and then Dr. Stange talked about community-based system dynamics, and I want to give you some of the highlights of where that came from and some of the key moments. It's not an obvious move for an electrical engineer and somebody trained in math to get really deeply involved in participatory systems modeling, nor is it all that obvious of how that gets going. And I want to highlight also some of the opportunities here at Case Western. So the subject of my work has generally focused on structural violence, and this is, I think about structural violence in terms of, I use Galton's framework. You could think about the events of going to the emergency room and injury as isolated events, but underneath those events is a propensity or risk. And that risk gets concentrated more heavily in marginalized communities that are affected. And there's a gap between what happens and what people get exposed to and what we could prevent through new technology, innovations, prevention. Pam outlined a number of these already as an example. And the gap between this underlying propensity, so the status quo, and what we could prevent is what Galton refers to as structural violence. And it's something where we think about systems as producing that violence. If we think about climate change, for example, you could think about the underlying changes in the climate and the specific events being things like fires and what we're observing. Now, the challenge with that is you need to have some way to see the systems that are generating that, and that's a challenge. It's easy to see cause-effect relationships when we have some specific action and some specific consequence. So Lakoff talks about this in the context of climate change. John Powell, who was at the Kirwan Institute in Ohio State University at the time and had the opportunity to work with, talks about this in the context of structural racism. And one of the important points he brings out is systems thinking actually has a way to help us see these systems, and that's what I'll be focusing on. Now, there are lots of ways we can see systems. We don't necessarily need to use mathematics. One of my professors and mentors, Marilyn Frye, feminist philosopher, she used the birdcage metaphor as an example of systems of oppression. Up close, you can't really see what those barriers are. But you take a step away and you get some distance and you can begin to see why the bird is not able to escape. She had a second metaphor, which she used a lot to talk about sexism, homophobia, racism, and that's the prevailing wind. So this constant press that's always sort of working against you. So you don't see that, but the trees are leaning in a particular direction. So we can use metaphors very effectively to reveal a lot about systems and thinking about how to change them. I'm particularly interested in using a tool called system dynamics, which is in system science. And that's a way of understanding Kurt talked a little bit about this, understanding endogenous or feedback sources of system behavior. So we do this in a participatory way. On the left, you see this is called a cause loop diagram, and this is drawn by moms and dads in St. Louis, where the question was, what does it take to raise a child in St. Louis? No formal training in system dynamics. This is a participatory exercise, and you see things like education influences employment, employment influences education. On the right is a second type of diagram called a stock and flow diagram. This is looking at maternal and neonatal mortality. This is with healthcare leaders in Honduras. And the boxes here represent accumulations or different stages of decision-making about where to deliver a baby, and then they have mapped in the various interventions. So those are qualitative techniques, but we can also convert these into computer simulation models. So this is the same work at a later stage, working with, this is funded with Gates Foundation, Carlos Slim, Government of Spain, and implemented with the Inter-American Development Bank, again with working with Honduras. And what you see here is the supply side and demand side of different types of services for prevention and response to reducing neonatal and maternal mortality. This particular project led to a ranking of different combinations of interventions and essentially the discovery of a leverage point that ended up becoming called QI Plus, Quality Improvement Plus. Didn't tell Honduras how to implement it, but it did indicate where to focus the investments, and that in turn led to a $70 million investment to reduce maternal and neonatal mortality in Honduras. The specific approach, now there are lots of ways you can involve stakeholders, and Kurt talked a little bit about this. What we have developed over the years, and this is with collaborators around the world, including Kurt Stange and Johnny Rose here at Case Western several years ago when we first met, is called community-based system dynamics. So a lot of participatory modeling involves working with professionals, boards of directors, governments, but typically not at the level of a village or community. And working along those lines, Kurt talked a little bit about community-based system dynamics. This picture here is from some work with Gautam Yadama at one of our winter institutes in India, and it signifies to me what it is the goal. So over a period of 2 weeks working on understanding water resources, we're doing a series of participatory exercises. We have transdisciplinary multilingual teams, and at the end of that exercise, it's not the research team, it's not the professors or the students who are getting trained. It's actually the community members who are explaining what's going on in their system and making that system visible from an endogenous perspective. It's an empowering approach. It's one that often gives hope and lets us see things in a different light. So how did community-based system dynamics get going? Well, it wasn't, well, I should say, Kurt mentioned a number of different projects and so forth. These are all places where there's been some type of community-based system dynamics, including communities of practice. And actually, one of the draws to come here was the opportunity to work with a group that had already begun to using these methods, including Darcy Friedman, who's been using these techniques in Food Nest, and Dana Prince, who very quickly picked these up and began applying them to working with at-risk at-risk youth with sexual orientation and gender identity expression minority youth. So what's the story for how this developed? So I don't share this too often, but when I initially started learning about system dynamics and building models, I was dead set against group model building. Seemed like a really hard thing to do. Seemed like it's hard enough to build a computer model that represents a system. Why would you make a participatory process? It's hard to learn one thing well. Why would you try to do both of them? So my colleague at the time, Gautam Yadama at Washington University, he's now the Dean of Social Work at Boston College, and I had an opportunity to do a technical assistance project with Save the Children UK in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. The question was, how do you, could we evaluate the impact of conditional cash transfer programs on children's schooling? We spent months preparing for this workshop. We had literally stacks of papers and survey tools, and we were focusing on school dropout. Within about 2 hours of the first workshop, somebody said, why do you talk about school dropout? In order for kids to drop out of school, they've got to be in school. And not all the kids who are in school are necessarily dropping out. Some are leaving early, some are coming late because they're caring for a parent. And within about 3 hours, we had this structure here, basically. And that was very exciting. I told my colleague, Gautam Yadama, we're doing group model building. So despite my best efforts to avoid group model building, we were doing it. And it's probably actually pretty consistent with the way Jack Venix talks about group model building. The next Monday, they had translated this. I didn't know this, but they had translated this into Mongolian, and they had a meeting with the Department of Statistics, and they were presenting what was unique about their program to government. I thought, this is really interesting. So not only do we need to engage people to understand what the problem is, we need to, this has potential for programs, organizations to communicate what they're doing that's unique and innovative, and they can pick up and learn these methods through doing. The second project that happened sort of fairly quickly from that was the statewide mental health transformation. We'd just come back from Mongolia, quite literally. And somebody had said to Diana McFarland, who was heading up the SAMHSA-funded statewide mental health transformation effort, you need to talk to Peter Hovmand. They have a way of understanding systems, and they were getting this activity kicked off. 250 people from across the state of Missouri working in 5 working groups, meeting twice a month. And they needed some way to sort of help see the system. So Diane and I met, initially not sure what the goal was. And then we set this up to do an initial 90-minute meeting was going to be focused on half of it was going to be on a group model building exercise. So we did that. And Diane was very clear about this. She says, this has to work with consumers and family members, or this phase is done. It has to be something that works with folks who are advocating for services where families can see the benefit in their lives. So there are a couple of things that really jumped out of that. The first one was this notion of dignity of risk. One of the participants talked about how they were often excluded from process. They were going to carry the risk of something in terms of harms and benefits of these policy changes. At the end of that session, he also came up and he said this was the first time he had a way for others to understand how complex his day-to-day experience was as a person living with mental illness. And he really appreciated that. And then the last point we really sort of took away was it was unknown at that point what exactly would make transformation. What does it mean to transform a mental health system? And this gave folks a way to visualize that. The second major project we really intentionally went in was this is in the Social System Design Lab, and this was sponsored by OBSSR, and this was looking at social determinants of childhood obesity. This is Timothy Hauer. He was the associate director and co-founder of the Social System Design Lab. And so we had a first workshop after we had planned this was with the clergy from West End neighborhood. And Bishop George White at the end of that workshop said, I have my Sunday sermon. So it really spoke to the point of these sessions have to be valuable. They have to give meaning, not a year from now, but it had to be meaning. And once we had that type of buy-in and interest, things really took off. St. Louis, the Rittner School District had been a terrific collaborator. You see Mary Sheets. We spent a lot of time in K through 12 education with a thought that it is often easier to invest upstream. And then when you do that, you begin to see all kinds of interesting feedback effects. There's work we've done on scale-up and looking at childhood obesity preventions. Terry Wong, who's now at NYU, was at NIH at the time. This was funded initially by NIH, and then looking at how do you scale up behavioral interventions. Over the years, Gautam and I have had many opportunities to work together in Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka and India. We had a Winter Institute where we would teach students and looking at natural resources, and this work continues. So this is where it becomes sort of really even more interesting, and I'm hoping these are the types of things that can develop here. One of the things that we really started doing was providing workshops for organizations. This is one of Youth in Need, where they brought their staff to solve a problem. They knew there was a problem they're going to work on. We didn't know what it was. We got heads up about a month out, and then they prepared this, and then they implemented the solution the following week. In this case, it was looking at stabilizing Head Start work weeks. And then changing systems. Over the years, we've had a great engagement, and I hope we have opportunities to do that here. There already are some great programs with the Yes CEO program, as well as the Provo Scholars. So So what's next? So we have, there are 4 areas, I think. One is really sort of pushing this idea of community-based system dynamics of design science. That is, we're talking about creating a future reality that many of us have actually never experienced yet. in terms of really sort of a different experience around cancer diagnosis or different experience around going to school or a doctor. And I think of these as changing the meaning of that experience into design-driven innovation. And how can we use community-based system dynamics to do that? The second point is really the technology for building these models has become much more accessible. And in particular, to be able to see how these feedback systems evolves has now become a way you can visualize it in the software in what previously might have taken 10, 15 years of experience building these models. So I really want to sort of push this idea that the simulation, modeling, analysis, and interpretation has to be more accessible and transparent for all. So shortening that distance between the interpretation and the analysis, not the expert modelers, but community members, people with lived experience. The third is really creating these inclusive transdisciplinary research collaborations. Working with Pam, for example, and Nicole Deming, we're looking at retaining the role of women in academic medicine. There's also been some really nice work that I've started to get involved with Diana Moria at Weatherhead and folks who are leading the NIH First on underrepresented minority faculty in STEM. And these simulation models, these are simulation models. We're also using group model building. They're really sort of highlighting some important leverage points. And then opportunities for mentoring and supporting colleagues' applications of community-based system dynamics to advancing equity. There are many folks to name here. I mentioned Darcy. There's Johnny Rose, Brian Brosek. Heidi Gullett is leading a tremendous amount of work on structural racism that I try to support. John Ansa, and then folks around the country, including Irene Hendon, Eden, and Devin Payne Sturgis, and Claire Ng of University of Hawaii. There are folks to thank, of course, along the way, too many to name, but certainly my immediate family, and Ivan, who's here, as well as Charlene. We didn't bring our dogs, but they figure centrally in some of these models. My dear friends, Stephen Jefferson and Melissa White, who've been with me pretty much for as long as I can remember, talking about these topics and patient. And then my parents, Kurt mentioned them, Beverly and Sven, and my brother Lars, who also is electrical engineer. And for a while, he was running Linear Labs. I think that's still the company. And most of the stuff I do is nonlinear, so you can imagine how those conversations go. Many great teachers in the academy, and that's why I'm here. I believe deeply in the importance of having great teachers and mentors, and of course, many colleagues and collaborators who really took the risk to do something new. So thank you.
So Steve, Peter, I'm going to have you stand here for a second before you sit. I think you've outdone yourself. Most of us, I think, in the room, although we've heard of you and had some sense and appreciation of what you were up to, I don't think most of us have heard you present on these topics before. So I'm really delighted that you went into some detail and educated us in what you do at a fundamental level. So thank you very much for that. And I hope it leads to further conversation, engagements, and collaborations. Endowed professors are a serious business for academic institutions. I hope you appreciate that. They certainly represent a mark of honor. And as Pam noted, from now on, it'll change your letterhead and change your signature and change how you present yourself at national meetings and publications and the like. Certainly, it's an activity that we value greatly as academic institutions of honoring scholarship and long-term productivity and commitment. So it really is my pleasure for all of us to present Peter Hovmand as the inaugural Pamela B. Davis, MD, PhD professor. And I'm going to let you sit down in the chair. And you'll take the chair with you, although we might deliver it to your office. And the back of the chair does, in fact, have an insignia on it, just to remind us of this day. Although the date may actually be off a little bit, because we've been trying to have this for almost 2 years. So I'm going to invite families to come and join us for a few photographs. The rest of us can have some conversation and a reception in the atrium, and we'll join you a little while. And be mask conscious. I think we all are in this day and age. And I greatly appreciate all of you coming and participating with us this afternoon. Thank you.